The edge of the Terran boundary wasn't marked by a wall. It wasn't marked by weapons platforms or patrol ships, or even a simple radio signal broadcasting in the Empire's 63 recognized languages. It was marked by a single orange buoy. That was it. One buoy, drifting lazily in the dark between the Keshan Drift and what the Empire's navigation charts labeled simply as Sector Null, a name cartographers had given it 200 years ago when their long-range scanners returned nothing useful, and they decided, collectively, that nothing useful was probably all there was. Commander Veth O'Connor of the Imperial Survey vessel Prolonged Certainty stared at the buoy through the forward observation lens for a long moment. It was painted orange. It had a small blinking light on top. It said nothing, transmitted nothing. It simply existed, the way a stone exists at the edge of a property line, not threatening, not explaining itself, just being there with a quiet confidence that somehow felt more serious than any weapon Veth had ever seen pointed at her hull. "That is their warning?" Her second officer, Prath Nimalo, said this from the navigation console. His secondary eyelids were cycling open and closed, the Keshan equivalent of nervous laughter. "One buoy? For an entire sector?" "Apparently," Veth said. She was a tall woman by Keshan standards, with pale silver-gray coloring along her dorsal ridge and the kind of stillness in her face that senior officers develop after too many years watching younger officers make catastrophic decisions. She had 12 commendations on her record. She had also, quietly, made several catastrophic decisions herself, which was perhaps why she understood the particular weight of this moment better than Prath did. The buoy was not a threat. The buoy was a statement. There is a difference, and Veth had lived long enough to know it. "Pull up everything we have on Sector Null," she said. "Commander," said her data specialist, a young officer named Sinu whose neck frills were still the bright gold of someone fresh out of the academy. "The archives on Sector Null they're sparse. There are 73 survey missions logged as entering the boundary region over the last 200 years. And Sinu's frills went pale. Only 11 came back. Silence spread through the bridge like cold water filling a low room. "The other 62? Prath asked. "No wreckage. No bodies. No distress signals." Sinu swallowed. "They just stopped transmitting." Veth looked at the buoy again. Orange, she thought. They chose orange. She didn't know why that bothered her more than the numbers did. 62 ships. Gone without a trace. And the creatures who lived in that darkness had chosen to mark their territory with something that looked, for all the galaxy, like a construction warning outside a building site. "Mind the gap," the buoy seemed to say. "We're working in here," said a holding pattern, Veth said. "Do not cross the boundary. I need to consult the Imperial directive before we do anything else." Prath looked relieved. Sina looked like he might briefly love her. The Prolonged Certainty turned in a slow arc and held its position 3,000 kilometers from the orange buoy, and Veth went to her private quarters and pulled up the Imperial Directive on Terran space, a document that was, officially, 60 pages long. She read it in full for the first time. She had been issued this assignment 6 months ago and told she was conducting a routine boundary survey, and she had not, in 6 months, read the document she had been issued. She read it now. By page 12, she stopped. She went back to page 6 and read a specific passage again. Then she sat very still for a while. Then she opened her communication terminal and sent a priority message to Imperial Central with a subject line that read, simply, "Did any of you people actually read this directive before you sent us out here?" The response from Imperial Central took 11 hours. Veth spent those 11 hours reading the full 60 pages 3 more times, cross-referencing the footnotes, and tracing the chain of documentation back through 2 centuries of imperial bureaucracy. She didn't sleep. She barely drank the nutrient solution her aide left outside her door. By the time the response arrived, she had filled 17 pages of her personal log with notes, questions, and what could generously be called structured disbelief. The response from Imperial Central read, "Commander Veth O'Connor, your query has been received. The directive on Terran space is classified level amber, and all questions should be directed to the Office of Boundary Affairs. Please confirm your current coordinates and await further instruction." She stared at that message for a long moment. Then she wrote back, I am 3,000 kilometers from the Terran boundary. I am confirming my coordinates. I am not awaiting further instruction. I am telling you what the directive says, in case none of you have read it, and asking you to explain it to me, because if I am reading this correctly, we have been sending survey ships into that sector for 200 years in violation of an agreement that your founder signed. The directive said many things, but the thing it said that had frozen Veth in her chair was this. In the 43rd year of the imperial calendar, 161 years ago, the Galactic Empire had made formal contact with the dominant species of Sector Null. Those species called themselves Terrans. The contact had not gone well, in the way that collisions between a moving vehicle and a stationary object do not go well. Technically, only one party moves, but both parties are changed by the encounter. The Terrans had requested, formally, through channels, that the Empire leave their sector alone. The Empire had agreed. The Empire had signed a document. The document was called the Terran Boundary Accord, and it was, by any reasonable reading, one of the most significant diplomatic agreements in Imperial history. It was also, apparently, a document that had been filed in a subsection of the Imperial Archives under the heading Miscellaneous External Agreements, Non-Priority, and had not been cited in any official policy briefing in approximately 130 years. Because, the footnotes suggested, for the first 30 years after signing, the Empire had largely honored it. And then a generation of administrators had retired, and a new generation had arrived, and the new generation had inherited charts that labeled a large section of space Sector Null without any particular explanation, and they had done what bureaucracies always do when they inherit something labeled null. They had assumed it meant empty. They had started sending ships. 62 ships.
Gone.
No wreckage. No bodies. No distress signals. The Terrans had not fired on them. The Terrans had not communicated with them. The Terrans had simply dealt with the situation.
Quietly.
Efficiently. In a manner that produced no wreckage, no bodies, and no distress signals, which meant either that the 62 ships had been destroyed so completely that nothing remained, or, and this was the thought that had kept Veth awake for 11 hours, or the ships were still there, somewhere inside Sector Null. And the reason there were no distress signals was that distress signals apparently did not leave Terran space. Nothing did. That was the other thing the directive said. Page 31. Footnote 17. Terran space operates under navigational principles inconsistent with standard Imperial physics models. Long-range scanning returns null data not due to absence of matter, but due to active interference at the quantum lattice level. The nature of this interference is not understood. Attempts to model it have failed. It is recommended that this phenomenon be treated as a fixed environmental constant and not a variable. Active interference. At the quantum lattice level. They've done something to space itself, Veth said aloud to her empty quarters. The empty quarters did not disagree. 11 hours and 14 minutes after she had sent her message, a second response arrived from Imperial Central. It read, Commander Veth O'Connor. You are correct. The situation you have identified is known to a small number of senior administrators. You are instructed to maintain your holding pattern and speak to no one about this matter until a designated senior official can be dispatched to your location. ETA, 19 days. Veth read this message. Then she wrote back. Something has already left Terran space. It is currently drifting toward my ship. I suggest you send someone faster. It was not a weapon. Veth was certain of that within the first 30 minutes of observation, though certain was doing significant work in that sentence, because the thing was unlike anything in the Imperial catalog of known objects, and certainty about unknown things is always somewhat borrowed confidence. It was approximately the size of a personal transit pod. Its surface was dark, not black exactly, but the specific shade of something that has absorbed light for a very long time and is not giving it back. It had no visible propulsion system. It had nothing visible, really, except a faint geometric pattern on one face that Sinu initially catalogued as decorative until the prolonged certainties materials analyst pointed out, with visible discomfort, that the pattern was actively shifting. Not randomly. It did not match any known signal encoding. But not randomly. It's a message, said Sinu.
We don't know that, said Prath.
It's behaving like a message, said Sinu. Look at the repetition intervals. Whatever that pattern is doing, It resets every 47 seconds. That's not natural movement. That's structured output. In a language we don't have, Veth said. In a language we don't have, Sinu confirmed. Veth stood at the observation lens and looked at the thing for a long time. It had not moved toward them in any aggressive way. It had simply drifted across the boundary, past the orange buoy, which continued blinking with the peaceful unconcern of something that had seen this happen before, and stopped at a distance of approximately 400 kilometers from the prolonged certainty's hull. It was waiting. That was the only word for it. It was waiting the way a question waits in the air after someone asks it, and the room goes quiet. What's our defensive capability against an unknown object of that class? Veth asked her weapons officer, a compact woman named Dory, who always looked slightly impatient with the universe. Theoretically,
Dory said,
we could fire on it. And practically, Dory's neck frills went a complicated color that Veth had learned over 3 years to interpret as, I would rather not find out. Practically, Commander, we do not know what that object is made of, we do not know what it does, and we do not know what happens if you shoot something that came out of a region of space that does things to physics that our models cannot explain. So firing on it is not recommended. Firing on it, Dory said carefully, is the option I would select only after all other options had been exhausted. Several of us had died, and the situation had already become dramatically worse than it currently is. Noted. Veth turned back to the observation lens. Can we communicate with it? We've been broadcasting on all standard frequencies since it appeared, Sina said. No response. What about non-standard? Sinu hesitated. Define non-standard, Commander. I mean, Veth paused, searching for how to phrase what she was thinking. The pattern on its surface. The 47-second intervals. Can we mirror it back? Sinu's frills went gold. The bright, instinctive gold of an idea landing. You want to reflect its signal at it. I want to tell it, Veth said, that we are paying attention. There was a silence on the bridge. That's either very clever, Prath said, or the thing that kills us all. Most things are, said Veth. Do it. Sinu's hands moved across his console. The prolonged certainty configured its exterior emitters to mirror the geometric pattern, imperfectly, inevitably, because they were working from visual observation rather than direct signal access, but structured. Intentional. The thing drifted in space 400 kilometers away. The pattern on its surface shifted. And then, for exactly 1 second, in a way that Sinu would spend the rest of his career trying to explain in technical terms that never quite satisfied him, every system on the prolonged certainty went completely, absolutely silent. Not dead. Not damaged. Silent. As if the ship had taken a breath. And then everything came back on, exactly as it had been, except that there was now a new file in the communications archive that had not been there before. Text only. In perfect Imperial standard. It read, You found the Accord. Good. We were wondering how long that would take. We have been watching the survey ships for some time. We have not harmed them. They are guests. Confused guests, but guests. We would like to speak to whoever is responsible for sending ships into our space without reading what they signed. We understand this may take some time to arrange. The buoy will remain. Please do not remove it. We are fond of it. Veth forwarded the message to Imperial Central with a subject line that read, They have our ships. They want a meeting. I suggest you move quickly. The response came back in 4 hours this time. Progress. It read, Commander Veth O'Connor, you are hereby authorized to open preliminary diplomatic communication with the Terran entity. Do not make commitments. Do not discuss the missing survey vessels in detail. Do not. The list of things she was not supposed to do ran to 26 bullet points. Veth read the document, acknowledged it formally, and then composed her response to the Terran object with the quiet, experienced calm of someone who has spent 30 years in the Imperial Survey Corps observing how institutional instructions often fail to align with reality. She wrote, This is Commander Veth O'Connor of the Imperial Survey Vessel Prolonged Certainty. I have read the Accord. I have also read the survey logs. I want to be direct with you. I did not know about the Accord when I was assigned this mission. I do not believe most people in the current administration know about it. I am not defending that. I am telling you the truth because I think you already know it, and there is no value in pretending otherwise. I would like to understand what happened to the 62 ships. Additionally, I want to know what you hope to gain from this discussion.
She sent it.
The response came back in 11 minutes. Commander Vethocanner, your directness is noted and appreciated. It is, in our experience, unusual for Imperial officers. The 62 ships are intact. Their crews are well. We have been providing for them in ways compatible with their physiological needs. Some of them have been here for quite a long time and have adapted. We will discuss their return as part of broader conversations. What we want from this conversation is simple. We want the Empire to remember what it agreed to, not to punish, not to demonstrate superiority. We have no interest in those things. We want the Empire to remember, because forgetting has costs. You have felt some of those costs: 62 ships, years of confusion, and a boundary marked by a single buoy that your cartographers labeled nothing and proceeded to sail through repeatedly. There is a concept in Terran philosophy. It does not translate precisely, but the closest Imperial equivalent might be the catastrophic laziness of assuming that silence means empty. Your cartographers saw null data from our space and concluded our space was null. It is not null. It is simply private. We will speak again soon. We suggest you use the intervening time to brief your administration thoroughly. Also, the buoy is solar-powered. Someone should be aware of this for maintenance purposes. Veth read this message 3 times. Then she forwarded it to Imperial Central, this time without a subject line, because no subject line she could write would have improved on the message itself. Then she called her senior staff into the briefing room and told them everything. Not because Imperial Central had authorized it. Because 62 ships meant 62 crews, and those were people, and people's families were somewhere in the Empire waiting for news. And Veth had decided somewhere around page 31 of the directive, somewhere around footnote 17, actually, that she was done treating the absence of authorization as permission to stay silent. She told her staff everything. She expected shock. She got something more complicated. The specific, exhausted look of people who had always suspected the Empire was larger and stranger and less organized than it presented itself, receiving confirmation. They've had our people for 200 years, said Dory. Not a question. It was just a statement, placed carefully on the table between them all, like something that needed to be acknowledged before anything else could happen. The most recent ships, less than that, Veth said. But yes, some of the crews have been there for a long time. And they've been cared for, said Sinu. He was frowning at his notes. That's not what you do with prisoners. No, Veth said. What is it? He asked. Veth thought about the message, about the specific language in it.
Confused guests.
I think, she said slowly, it's what you do with people who arrived uninvited at your home, repeatedly for 200 years, and you kept letting them in because turning them away entirely felt unkind, but you never quite managed to make them understand why they should have knocked first. The briefing room was quiet. We've been the rude neighbors, Prath said. For 200 years, Dory said. Yes, said Veth. Another silence. Well, said Prath, in the tone of someone who has processed something terrible and arrived at the only available response, that is profoundly embarrassing. 12 days later, days before Imperial Central's designated senior official was scheduled to arrive, the Terran object sent a new message. It said, "We would like to send a representative to your ship. One individual. No equipment exceeds what is necessary for their physiological comfort in your environment. We understand if you need time to authorize this." Veth sent back, "You can come now." Imperial Central had not authorized this either. She was developing a pattern. The Terran arrived via a transfer method the prolonged certainty science team would argue about for 3 years. One moment the airlock outer door was closed and sealed. The next moment there was a soft sound somewhere between a chime and a breath, and when the outer door opened, operated from inside by something, the Terran was simply there. They watched through the internal camera for 5 minutes before opening the inner door, and what Beth saw in those 5 minutes was something she spent a long time afterward thinking about. The Terran was standing in the airlock with their hands visible at their sides. They were visually not monstrous, not spectacular. They were of medium height, bilaterally symmetrical, and bipedal, with a face that was arranged in a way that registered as calm. They were wearing a gray garment that covered most of their body. They had hair, a dark color, pulled back from their face in a simple way. They looked, in the most literal and disorienting possible sense, like a person, not a Keshan. The proportions were different. The coloring was different. There were no neck frills, no dorsal ridge, and no secondary eyelids. But person. Unmistakably. Someone standing in a small metal room waiting to be let in. Not performing patience. Not performing the threat. Just waiting. Like someone waiting for a door in a building they had reason to believe was a reasonable place. Veth opened the inner door. The Terran walked through. They looked at Veth. Veth looked at them. Commander Vethocaner, the Terran said. In Imperial Standard. Spoken with an accent that was not quite any regional accent Veth had heard, cleaner than most, actually, with a precision that suggested someone who had learned the language from texts rather than speakers, and then corrected for it. Thank you for receiving me. Thank you for coming, Veth said, which was true in the way that important truths are sometimes also the most simple ones. My name is, the Terran paused. The direct translation of my designation does not render well in your phonology. For the purpose of our conversations, you may call me Cole. Cole, Veth said. Yes. You speak Imperial Standard. We have had guests for a long time, Cole said. A small shift in their expression. Not quite a smile, something quieter, with more history in it. Their languages were part of what we learned from them. Veth led Cole to the briefing room. Her staff stood as they entered, not out of ceremony, but as a specific and voluntary response to encountering something significant that required them to be physically upright to process it. Cole looked at each of them in turn. Something in their gaze was attentive was the word Veth kept returning to. Genuinely, deeply attentive. Not studying them like specimens. Studying them like people they were deciding to trust. We should tell you something before we begin, Cole said, taking a seat at the table with the ease of someone who had sat at tables before. Our representative capacity here is not political. I am not a diplomat. I am. The closest translation is a person whose function is to meet people. We have several. I was sent because I am told I am the best at it. That is a remarkable thing to be the best at, Sina said, and then looked slightly as though he wished he hadn't spoken. Cole looked at him. You are kind to say so. Not dismissive. Actually meaning it. The 62 ships, Veth said. I want to begin there. I want my people to know. Yes, Cole said. That is where we should begin. And so they began. Cole talked for 4 hours. Not without pausing, they paused often, and each pause had a quality of someone not gathering words but choosing them, the way you choose something you intend to place carefully rather than simply set down. The story of the 62 ships was not a story of capture. It was, as Cole told it, a story of miscommunication at the scale of civilizations, a phenomenon Cole seemed to find deeply, genuinely sad in a way that had no performance in it. The first ship had entered Terran space 180 years ago. The Terrans had, at that point, been in possession of the Accord for 20 years and had assumed, reasonably, Cole acknowledged, that the Empire's compliance was simply the slow machinery of bureaucracy catching up with a recent agreement. They had intercepted the ship. Politely. Explained the situation. The ship's crew had not believed them. This was the part of the story that Sinu found hardest to accept, and he said so. How do you not believe someone who intercepts your vessel and shows you a signed document? They believed the document was a forgery, Cole said. They believed they had encountered a species that had fabricated evidence of an imperial agreement to claim sovereignty over unclaimed space. This is something that has apparently happened before. In imperial history. It has, Veth said. So they reported this to Imperial Central. They reported that they had encountered a space-claiming species using fabricated documents. And Imperial Central filed it under miscellaneous, Veth said. Filed it under miscellaneous, Cole confirmed. Yes. And sent another ship to verify 6 months later. They also didn't believe you. They also didn't believe us. At that point, we had a decision to make. We could. Cole paused, and the pause was long enough that Veth felt its shape. We could treat the situation as hostile. These were, after all, vessels entering our space in violation of an agreement. Repeatedly, despite being told clearly. But you didn't, Veth said. We didn't. Because the crews were not hostile. They were. Cole seemed to search for the right word across several languages simultaneously. They were obedient. They were doing what their institutions told them. Their institutions were doing what institutions do, moving forward without looking backward, assuming that nothing old was still relevant, treating silence as emptiness. Cole looked at the table for a moment. We could not be angry at the instrument for what the hand had directed. But 62 ships, Dory said. At some point it became a question of what we owed each other, Cole said. We had the ships. We had the crews. Returning them early on meant returning them to an institution that would hear their accounts, disbelieve the accord, and send more ships. It became a holding pattern, waiting for someone to actually read the document, waiting for someone to come to the boundary and stop instead of crossing it. The silence after that was a specific kind of silence, the kind that has a weight. You were waiting for us, Beth said. We were waiting for someone like you, Cole said.
Someone who stopped.
Who read what was there. Who did not assume that silence meant empty. Another pause. It took longer than we hoped. I'm sorry, Beth said. Caro, Cole said, a word that was not Imperial standard and that landed in the room with the weight of something significant, and then seemed to realize they had used a language no one present spoke. That word, they said. In our language, it means something between acknowledged and I carry this with you. It does not have a direct translation. I think I understand it, Beth said. Cole looked at her. The deep, attentive look. Yes, they said quietly. I think you do. Over the next 3 days, Cole talked about what Sector Null actually was. Not a military zone. Not a weapons testing ground. Not a civilization in the conventional sense of a centralized authority controlling territory. Terran space was, as Cole described it, slowly, carefully, choosing words the way a person chooses stones to cross a river, a managed ecosystem of cognition. Veth wrote that phrase down and stared at it.
Explain that, she said.
You have in your empire cities, Cole said. Population centers. Administrative hubs. Yes. We don't. We have a distributed presence. No single point is more important than another. No single location is the capital. The boundary exists not to protect a capital, but to protect the quality of the thinking that happens inside it. Prath leaned forward. The quality of the thinking? Yes. Cole seemed to be assembling something complex from simpler parts, the way an architect works with basic materials. Your quantum lattice interference, the thing your directive describes as physics behaving unusually inside our space. Yes, said Sinu, who had not stopped thinking about this since page 31. It is not a weapon. It is not a defense system in the military sense. It is, Cole paused. Imagine that cognition, thinking, is affected by the fabric of the space it occurs in. That the quantum structure of an environment subtly shapes the nature of thought that takes place within it. Certain geometric arrangements and resonance patterns in the underlying structure of space support specific types of complex cognition, just as certain soils support specific types of plants. You've engineered your space, Sina said. His frills had turned a deep gold, a color they only reached when he was in the grip of something that felt like the edge of understanding. We have cultivated it, Cole said. The distinctions seemed to matter to them. Over a very long time. Not in decades. Not in centuries. The quantum lattice structure you see now is the result of, they paused. Your calendar year is shorter than ours. In your years, approximately 80,000 years of deliberate cultivation. The room was very still. You're that old, Dory said. As a civilization that has been deliberately doing this, yes, Cole said. As a species, longer. And the scanning returns null data, because Sina started. Because what we have built does not register as a structure in your models, because your models assume that what you're looking for is the kind of structure you build. We don't build the way you build. We don't have cities. We don't have the electromagnetic signatures of industrial civilization. We have, Cole looked for the word, a different kind of presence. A very old, very quiet, enormous kind of presence. Veth sat with those words for a long moment. The survey ships that came in, she said. When they entered your space, what happened to their thinking? Cole's expression shifted into something Veth could only describe as careful. The quantum lattice environment is not harmful to your cognition. It is incompatible, in the short term, in specific ways. Your crews found it difficult to form certain kinds of decisions while inside our space. Not because of damage. Because the space supports a different kind of thinking, slower, more systemic, less linear. Your crews became contemplative. We believe it was at least tolerable for them, though it was confusing. They couldn't navigate back out, Veth said. Navigation requires a certain linear, sequential cognition that the lattice environment does not support, Cole said. Not forever, but for long enough that by the time they recovered their full sequential function, they had drifted far enough that navigating out had become a genuine challenge. A pause. We didn't prevent them from leaving. We simply couldn't give them back the kind of thinking they needed to leave on their own, also disrupting the environment that we have spent 80,000 years building. SYMJHY, Veth said, a phrase from her own regional dialect, something her grandmother had said. It meant something like, from this point, I understand differently. She hadn't meant to say it aloud. Cole looked at her with an expression she hadn't seen on their face before. Something warmer. More direct. Yes, Cole said quietly. SYMJHY.
Exactly that.
The designated senior official from Imperial Central arrived 9 days late, on a vessel 3 times the size of the Prolonged Certainty and with a staff complement of 47. His name was Administrator Lorithsen, and he was, in Veth's experience, the living embodiment of an institution in human form, precisely dressed, extraordinarily confident, and in possession of a briefing document that had been prepared specifically for this meeting by people who had not read the Accord and had not spoken to Cole. He arrived on the Prolonged Certainty, rather than receiving Veth on his own ship, which Veth noted and filed, and immediately asked to be shown the Terran representative. Veth showed him Cole. Cole stood when Lorith entered the briefing room, which was a Terran gesture Veth had learned. Standing when someone entered was not a dominant signal for them, but a recognition signal, a way of saying, I see you. You are present. I am here also. Lorith interpreted it as deference, which was not Cole's fault. I am Administrator Lorithsen, Senior Diplomatic Authority for Imperial Central's Boundary Affairs Division, Lorith said, taking his seat with the practiced ease of someone whose entire career had consisted of being the most important person in the room. I understand you have a matter of some urgency regarding Imperial survey vessels. We have 62 of them, Cole said pleasantly. Lorith set down his briefing document.
Yes.
We would like those returned. We would like to return them, Cole said. We also would like to discuss the Accord. The Accord, Lorith said, in the tone of someone who had been briefed on its existence without being briefed on its actual contents, is a historical document that was signed under circumstances quite different from the current situation. Veth felt, rather than saw, Cole go still. Cole said. One word. But the way they said it, the shape of that in the room, was like a door closing. Not angrily. Not dramatically. Simply, a door that had been open-closing. Cole, Veth said carefully. Cole looked at her. The attentive look. Give him a moment, she said. He has not read it. I have been briefed on its key provisions, Lorith said. Administrator, Veth said, with the particular patience of someone who has chosen their words the way Cole chooses words, carefully for where they need to land. Have you personally read the Accord?
A pause.
The key provisions. Have you personally read it? The pause was its answer. Cole looked at Lorith for a long moment. Then they reached into their gray garment and produced a physical document, actual material, actual pages, in a format that was clearly not Imperial manufacture, and set it on the table. This is a copy of the Accord, Cole said, in the original form, with all signatories. It has not been altered. You may verify this through any means available to you. A pause. We would ask that you read it before we continue. Lorith looked at the document. Then he looked at Cole. Then he looked at Veth. Veth looked back at him with an expression she had been practicing for 9 days. I am not going to rescue you from this, the expression said. You are going to read it. Lorith read it. It took him 40 minutes. The room was silent. Cole sat with the same quality of waiting they had shown in the airlock. Genuine, unperformed, the patience of something very old that has learned endurance, not as a virtue, but as a fact. When Lorith finished, he set the document down. He was quiet for a long moment.
This was signed, he said.
Yes, Cole said. By the Second Imperial Council. Yes. They had authority to bind future administrations to territorial agreements of this. Yes, Cole said. They did. And they did. And the agreement was valid. And it remains valid. Another silence. We would like our survey crews back, Lorith said, but the certainty had gone out of it. It was a request now, not a statement. Something had shifted in him. Veth could see it. Not defeat. Something more honest than defeat. We know, Cole said gently. And we will return them. All of them. Every crew. We have been preparing for this occasion for some time. A pause. We would like, in return, for the Empire to do one thing. What thing? Lorith asked. Remember, Cole said. Not as punishment. Not as humiliation, simply as a matter of basic accounting. Remember what you agreed to. Post the accord somewhere it cannot be filed under miscellaneous. Teach it in your institutions. Let the people who draw your charts know that null data does not mean nothing there. Lorith looked at Cole for a long time. That's all, he said. That's everything, Cole said. The return of the crews took 3 weeks to arrange. It was not, as Veth had half imagined, a parade of ships emerging dramatically from a dark boundary. It was quieter than that and stranger, and in some ways harder. The crews came back in small groups via the same transfer method Cole had used to board the Prolonged Certainty, a sound between a chime and a breath, and then people simply standing in spaces where they had not been standing before. Some of them had been inside Terran space for 5 years. Some for 20. One crew, the Survey Vessel Patient Inquiry, which had crossed the boundary 43 years ago, contained no one who had been originally assigned to it. That original crew had, over time, died of age inside Terran space, well cared for, and their places had been taken by descendants. Children born inside the lattice environment. People who had never seen Imperial space. They came back too.
14 of them.
Young, some of them. Looking at the Prolonged Certainty's corridors with expressions that were not fear. Something more specific. The expression of someone encountering something they've been told about their whole life and finding that it is simultaneously more and less than the description. One of them, a young woman of perhaps 20 years, with a Keshan face and eyes that moved differently from Keshan eyes, with a quality of focus that felt like the lattice environment. A person came to Veth on the second day and stood in the doorway of the briefing room. You're the commander, she said. Not a question. I am, Veth said. My grandmother was on the patient inquiry, the young woman said. My mother was born inside. I was born inside. She paused. I don't know what home means for me. Cole says it doesn't have to mean one place. Cole is wise, Veth said. Cole said to tell you something. The young woman reached into her pocket and produced a small folded note. Actual material, actual ink, and held it out. Veth took it. She unfolded it. It read, The people who grew up inside the lattice think differently from people outside it. Not better. Not worse. Differently. Please be patient with them. They will need time to adjust to sequential cognition at the speed your world runs. They have gifts, though. They see systems. They see connections. They see the slow shape of things. We believe they may be useful to your empire in ways your empire cannot currently imagine. We hope you will let them be. Also, the orange buoy has been replaced with a better model. Solar-powered still, but with a backup battery. We thought this was responsible. Caro.
Cole.
Veth folded the note and held it. The young woman was watching her. What's your name? Veth asked. Senna, the young woman said. Senna, Veth said. Welcome to Imperial space. I am going to do everything in my ability to make sure it deserves you. Senna looked at her for a long moment with those differently focused eyes. Cole said you would say something like that, she said. Did Cole say if I meant it? Cole said, Senna replied, that you mean everything you say, and that this is rare, and that the Empire should be careful not to waste it. Veth was quiet for a moment.
Go find somewhere to sit, she said.
This ship is yours as much as it's anyone's. There's a viewport at the end of the port corridor that has a wonderful view of the boundary. You might want to see it from this side.
Senna went.
Veth sat alone in the briefing room for a while and thought about the word Caro. Acknowledged, I carry this with you, and about 80,000 years of carefully cultivated space, and about orange buoys, and about the catastrophic laziness of assuming silence, means empty. Administrator Lorith sends official report to Imperial Central Rand to 412 pages. Veth read it. She had expected it to be defensive, the product of a man protecting himself and his institution from the weight of what had happened. Institutions produce defensive documents the way certain trees produce thorns, reflexively, automatically, as a survival mechanism. It was not defensive. She had not expected that. It was meticulous, thorough, merciless in a way that she recognized as a particular kind of courage, the courage of a person who has encountered something real and decided that representing it honestly is more important than representing themselves well. Lorith had written everything. The Accord, its history, the filing decision, 200 years of survey ships, the lattice environment, the crews. The children were born inside.
Cole.
The conversations. The document is on the table. He had written, the Empire did not do an evil thing. It did something perhaps more common, and in some ways more difficult to address. It did a careless thing repeatedly over a very long time, called the carelessness routine, called the routine policy, and called the policy necessary. It never went back to look at what it had agreed to before the routine began. He had written, the Terrans did not ask for an apology. They asked to be remembered. I believe your request is wiser than asking for an apology. An apology addresses a moment. Being remembered addresses the structure that produced the moment. He had written, I am recommending that the Terran Boundary Accord be reclassified as a primary imperial agreement, taught in all administrative training programs, and cited in all navigational chart briefings for the relevant sectors. I am further recommending that the Office of Boundary Affairs be restructured to include mandatory review of all historical agreements classified prior to the current administrative cycle. He had written, I recommend promoting Commander Veth O'Connor for her courageous decision to stop at the boundary and assess the situation. Veth read this last section twice. Then she went to find Lorith, who was in his temporary quarters reviewing departure logistics with his staff. She knocked on the door. He opened it. I read the report, she said. I know, he said.
It's honest, she said.
Yes, he said. It's going to cause significant difficulty for several senior administrators. Yes, he said again. Did you consider not being honest? Lorith was quiet for a moment. He had the look of a man who has recently learned something about himself and is still in the process of deciding what to do with it. I sat in that briefing room, he said, and Cole put the Accord on the table and waited for me to read it. No threat. No pressure. Just this is the thing. Read it. And I thought about all the people who had not read it for over 200 years and what that not reading had cost, and I thought, he paused. I thought, I will not be another person who didn't read it. Veth looked at him for a long moment. Good, she said. That's good. She turned to go. Commander, he said.
She stopped.
The promotion is real, he said. It's already been filed. I want you to know I did not do it to make myself look magnanimous. I know, Veth said. That's why it means something. 6 months after the prolonged certainty first sighted the orange buoy, Veth was back at the boundary. Different ship, the newly commissioned Attentive Presence, named by Veth herself, a name that had raised eyebrows in the naming committee and which she had declined to defend because she felt the name was its own defense.
Senna was aboard.
So was Sinu, who had been promoted and had spent 6 months writing a scientific paper on quantum lattice cognition environments that had been rejected by 4 academic journals and accepted by a 5th with a note saying it was either the most significant piece of original theoretical work they had received in a decade or complete nonsense, and they were publishing it to find out which. The new buoy was located at the same place as the old buoy. Orange still. Solar-powered with a backup battery. Blinking with the same steady, unconcerned rhythm. Beside the buoy, not touching it, maintaining a respectful distance, there was a new object. Small.
Dark.
The same shifting geometric pattern. A second communicator. They had left it for them. Veth brought the attentive presence to a holding position 3,000 kilometers out and opened a communication channel. "This is Commander Veth O'Connor," she said. "We are at the boundary. We have read the accord. We are not crossing it. We are here because we wanted to say something that didn't go in any official report." A pause. Then Cole's voice, without the delay she would have expected across that distance, was warm and present and exactly as she remembered it. "We're listening," Cole said. Veth looked at the buoy. The blinking light. The patient had an orange certainty about a thing that had been waiting a long time to be seen properly. "We're sorry it took so long," she said. "Not officially. Personally. I'm speaking for the people on this ship, for Senna, for Sinu, for everyone who came back. Not for the Empire. Just for us. The people who are trying to be the kind of people who stop and read what's there." A longer pause. "Caro," Cole said. And then, after a moment, he said, "Ob SYMJHY, Commander. From this point, we understand differently." Veth smiled. "Ob SYMJHY, she said back. Sinu, at his console, was making a sound that was probably not appropriate for a senior officer to make on the bridge, a sound somewhere between a laugh and something else, and no one said anything about it because most of them were making some version of the same sound, quietly, each in their own way. Senna stood at the viewport at the end of the port corridor, looking at the orange buoy, the dark object beside it, and the boundary that was not a wall but a statement, while thinking about what it meant to be from both sides of something. She thought it probably meant you could help both sides understand what the other one sounded like. She thought maybe that was worth having. 2 years later, in the Imperial Cartography Archives, a new notation appeared on every chart that showed the region previously labeled Sector Null. It was not a dramatic notation. The Empire's cartographers, to their credit, had chosen something simple. It read, "Terran space, protected under the Terran Boundary Accord, Second Imperial Council, Year 43. This region is inhabited. Active quantum lattice environment. Do not enter without authorization. Note: null data return does not indicate absence of content. See supplementary guidance on non-standard spatial signatures. For contact with Terran representatives, use the communications device located at the boundary. It is the dark object beside the orange buoy. The orange buoy is solar-powered with a backup battery. It does not require maintenance from Imperial personnel. Please do not remove it. They are fond of it." Below this notation, in a small text box that had been added not by any official cartography directive, but by a junior archivist named Fessel, who had read Veth's accounts and Loritha's report and Sinu's paper all in one long night, and had felt that something true needed to be said somewhere official. Below all the formal notation, in small but legible text, someone had written, "The catastrophic laziness of assuming that silence means empty." Terran philosophical principle. Approximate translation. Filed here, so it is not forgotten. And it wasn't.
Yendi.